I'll start with my usual greeting. Good morning to our friends in North and South America. Good afternoon to our friends in the UK and Europe. Good early evening to our friends in the Middle East. Good evening to our friends in India, Thailand, Singapore, Indonesia. Good late evening to our friends in Australia. Good to see you. Just to mention the reason I'm not showing my face on the screen, I have a little bit of an eye infection, which is fine, nothing too serious, but I don't want to scare you with a weeping red eye. It's the nature of the human body, subject to ailments sometimes. But I believe we have some questions. Shanxian.
Yes, we do. Question 1. Dear Ajahn, what types of meditations would you suggest for someone who meditates twice daily, with each session lasting 30 minutes? Could you also share a rough schedule? Thank you.
For a person meditating 30 minutes twice per day, what would I recommend? So I would recommend when you first come, just as we did just now, when you first come to sit, you feel your body, a bit of a body sweep, then feel the entire body of breath, nose, chest, abdomen for a couple of minutes. That's training the mind to be mindful of the breath, kind of sending that message to the mind that we're practicing awareness of breathing now. Working with the whole body of breath, nose, chest, abdomen, the beginning. We start with a broader field of awareness because the mind tends to be a little bit scattered or dull. And when we work with a broader field of awareness, we're kind of gently inclining the mind to slowly come together, or we're giving the mind something to do which can wake it up if it's feeling dull. But I do recommend spending, after a few minutes, just observing the broad breath. I do then recommend doing about 5 to 10 minutes of metta at the beginning of the sitting practice, when we establish a sense of goodwill, having loving kindness for oneself. This is very helpful for the mind becoming more deeply peaceful. So we're picking up a wholesome emotion, a wholesome mind object. When we cultivate metta further, it can become a pure form of samadhi, one of the Brahma Viharas. But in doing it for just 5 or 10 minutes, we're gladdening the mind, brightening the mind, making the body and mind an experience that we're content to be with. And then giving more interest to knowing the details of the breath. After the metta, we also do in conjunction with the breathing. Breathing in, may I be well. Breathing out, may I be happy. And then you can move on to some people for whom it's easy to have loving kindness towards, your favorite teachers or someone who's been like a parent, a good friend. Breathing in, wishing oneself well. Breathing out, wishing this other person for whom it's easy to have loving kindness towards, wishing them well. And then giving the interest to knowing the breath in more detail, knowing the beginning, middle, and end of each in-breath, beginning, middle, and end of each out-breath, and really making that the meditation object for the remainder of the sitting. And then in that last minute or so, dedicating and sharing merit. As a general practice, I think that's good. Many people find that 40 minutes is a good standard for busy people. Sometimes it takes about 20 minutes for the mind to actually settle. And if we're ending the meditation at 30 minutes, we only get about 5 minutes of peacefulness. So if you, having 40 minutes, if your mind takes 20 minutes to calm down and become peaceful, you might have a good 10 or 15 minutes then of the mind being collected and contented. So I would recommend try to increase at least one of these sits, maybe to 40 minutes. Aside from that, we also have to look, is there a lot of irritation or aversion in the mind? Is there a lot of grief, lamentation, sadness? We have to look at what hindrances are affecting the mind, and then we may need to apply an appropriate remedy. So for periods where there's irritation or grief or sadness, we spend more time on metta, establish well-being first. If there's more sensual craving, more sexual lust, more passion, if it's that spectrum, then we need to do some body contemplation. So in general, we have a basic practice, but we also keep an eye on which hindrances are present, which kilesas are present, and try to bring the mind into balance. And then rest with the breath. Hope that's helpful.
Question 2. Dear Ajahn, I have observed that many modern city Buddhists are more self-absorbed and are perhaps less grateful to their teachers when compared to, say, the traditional Buddhists of previous eras. I was thinking about this and have some questions. Is having respect and gratitude important for modern practitioners? If so, what is the appropriate way or approach of showing respect to teachers in the Thai forest tradition? Is sending metta, sharing merits, and offering practice a suitable means of paying respects? Thank you, Ajahn.
This person has observed that modern people, particularly city dwellers, can be more self-interested or self-absorbed and less grateful to their Buddhist teachers than previous generations and more traditional Buddhists. The question is respect and gratitude for teachers important? What, if it is, what are the ways to demonstrate that? So I want to start by saying, first of all, that myself, Achalo Bhikkhu, Ajahn Achalo, I feel loved, respected, appreciated enough. So I'm not speaking from any kind of agenda here. I feel respected and loved enough by my students. Not everybody all the time, obviously, but enough people, enough of the time. However, it is an important thing to consider. I think it's not necessarily urban people, but I think modern people, I think for the millennials and the Gen Zs, they have a big challenge in this area, a bigger challenge than people of my generation. Because I can, I'll just give a little bit of a backstory and then qualify some of the statements I'm making and why. I remember when I did the Goenkaji retreat, the Vipassana retreat, I remember what the methods were. I remember what the teachings were. And then I did that method for months. Goenkaji had been my teacher. I learned that method. So he recommended to meditate every morning, every evening. I did that for a few months. Became then once a day. But I wasn't like looking around for more teachers. I was practicing the Goenka Vipassana method for that period of time. When I traveled to Thailand as a backpacker, I met new teachers, Steve and Rosemary Weissman, and they were teaching several meditation methods, loving kindness, reflection on law of karma, recollecting one's good fortune, death reflection. And so I worked with their methods for a period of months. And so I remember even my very earliest teachers. I remember who they were. I remember what they taught me. And I do feel grateful. I do feel grateful that Ajahn Goenkaji stressed the importance of a daily discipline. He said that if anyone wants results from meditation, it's like any discipline. You have to be consistent, like athletes train, artists rehearse. You have to, if you want success in anything, be focused, be disciplined, be consistent. So I was really grateful. I really took that on board. I remember feeling some frustration that that method alone seemed somewhat limited. And so when I met Steve and Rosemary Weissman, who had kind of distilled their experience of studying with several of Thailand's masters for over a decade at that time, then they kind of come up with a package of practices that were supplementary, complementary. I found that really helpful because it helped me understand that Buddhist practice was a lifestyle, and that there were many methods. One didn't have to be just doing it when sitting. They also taught walking meditation. one had these different tools. If there was irritation, frustration, one could practice loving kindness. One could bring the mind to balance, gladden the mind, and a lot of restlessness, or one could contemplate death and sober the mind up, bring the mind more into the moment. And I started to feel really grateful to Lord Buddha, obviously, for helping many practitioners understand these practices and hand them down for millennia. But I was particularly grateful to Stephen Rosemary Weissman for teaching me those things. So I remember that they taught me those things. I remember when I cultivated those things that I benefited, then naturally I felt grateful. When I went to Wat Nanachat, a couple of years later, Ajahn Achalo was the teacher at that time. I remember feeling a bit kind of challenged, obviously, by the monk's life. There are so many rules, and the monastic etiquette, even more rules. But Ajahn Achalo had great faith in Lord Buddha, and he explained that the Buddhist discipline for the monks came from the mind of a purified Buddha. Buddha was foremost in the world. And Ajahn Achalo repeatedly said, Lord Buddha could have been anything, could have been a wheel-turning monarch. He chose the form of a samana, a renunciant, contemplative as his form, the way to spend the remainder of his life, 45 years, after his complete and full enlightenment. So all of these rules had come from a pure mind of a Buddha. And in explaining that, he lifted my faith. Okay, I'm willing to embrace these because it came from a purified mind of a Buddha. When I really did have faith that he was foremost in the world, so there's not much point arguing. Similarly, with all of the monastic etiquette, all the smaller minor rules of the monasteries, then he also had great faith that Luang Por Chah was an arahant. And he said these things came from the mind of a contemporary arahant. He had his reasons for doing them. Surrender with some confidence and be interested, learn from them. What was Luang Por Chah trying to teach us? These things obviously worked for him. And so when I look at my approach to, my experience of meeting Buddhist practice and embracing Buddhist practice and going deeper and deeper into Buddhist practice, I remember who my teachers were and I remember what they taught me. And so it's not difficult for me to feel loving respect and gratitude for those teachers. But the generations that followed have a different experience. They can search YouTube, they can search Dharma seeds, they can listen to many teachers, and it's a different experience. It's harder, I think, for people who listen to many, many teachings from many teachers. One can get this sense that the teachers are like a commodity. They're just another thing that one consumes. It's available on tap whenever you want it. And then when we have that kind of Dharma talks, because when I was a junior monk, there was the Dharma talk on the Uposatha day, once a week. And then you would listen to that Dharma talk and you think about that Dharma talk throughout the week, and then there'd be another Dharma talk. But there weren't a lot of Dharma talks. There was that one, and I appreciated the Dharma that was taught, thought about it deeply. And then when visiting teachers passed through, I'd learned something from that teacher, I'd learned something from that teacher. It's one of those things, it's like the internet is an incredible blessing if we know how to use it. It can also be a curse. One of the biggest challenges we have is focusing. But I think qualities of gratitude, qualities of respect are humbling. And this quality of humility, it's in the Mangala Sutta. One of the highest blessings is to be someone who is humble and modest. There's a reason for this. We're trying to lessen our sense of self. We're trying to have a deva-like sense of self, which is humble and modest. Gratitude and respect for others is a large component of that. Now, one of the challenges that we can have if we have Dharma talks which are available from many teachers on tap, online, whenever we want them, is we can kind of develop the mind of a critic. Like it's a bit like watching a mini-series or watching Netflix or whatever. You can critique a movie, you can critique an actor's performance, you can everyone's a critic in this day and age, and we develop a kind of a respect for criticism. That's a large part of dialogue, social media, critical comments, and one can develop a bit of a sense of, I used to like this one, but now I don't like him. I found this one's better. And one can be a bit dismissive with things that we have a lot of, if we have too easy an access to it. And the critical fault-finding mind is a real challenge, because we need to deeply appreciate the teachings, and to really apply them, we have to have a deep love and respect for them if we want them to inform our minds and humble things which are unwholesome, and give rise to things which are wholesome. So I do think that respect and gratitude is important. It plays a very important role in loosening the grip on the self and being attached to the opinions of the self, when we know how to be grateful, be respectful to others. And so it's very close to mudita, brahmavihara, which is a wholesome quality. But a lot of critical thoughts, a lot of critiquing, and dismissiveness towards people who are wise, or this isn't praised by anybody, but it's very seductive. So if we have a lot of knowledge, we listen to a lot of Dhamma, we might get a sense that we become something of an expert. We see this in I notice sometimes lay people talk about different teachers, they won't use the word Ajahn. I have heard lay people say, Amaro teaches this, but Samedo teaches that, and Jayasaro said this. And so I've been a bhikkhu for 27 years, and I would never call any of my teachers by their first name. And if anyone had a right to, I've been part of the community for 28 years. I'm a teacher myself. I'm a Mahatera myself. But I would never call Ajahn Jayasaro Jayasaro. I would never call Ajahn Amaro Amaro. It's like, I would always acknowledge that they're one of my teachers with the appropriate prefix. But this is something that happens in modern society. It is informal. It is irreverent. It is consumeristic. So I think it's a good practice to recollect the teachers that you have learnt most from, and learn to hold that recognition in mind with appreciation. And this is, I think, a relevant, valid teaching for everybody, not just for modern people or different generation, but also, everybody, myself included. I do it. I recollect, it's part of my sangha nusati. Who have been my teachers? What did I learn from them? And just hold a feeling of appreciation. I think that's one of the best ways to show gratitude, is to actually feel it. Hold it in your mind, recollect what you learned from this individual, and feel grateful. It's actually a very beautiful emotion. So it's not someone saying you should be grateful. It's someone saying allow yourself to be, rather than indulging the fault-finding mind a lot, which is painful. Recollect what was given, hold it in appreciative consciousness, incline the mind, allow the mind to feel grateful, and be blessed by that. Sometimes, even when we have good teachers, no teacher is perfect, only the Buddha was perfect. So sometimes with familiarity, we can become less appreciative, and we can focus more on what we think the fault is. This monk is too strict, I don't like him. This monk's too casual, I don't like him. It's like, we can critique and fault everybody. That won't really get us anywhere. Recollect the strengths of the people who have been your teachers. And that's actually helpful. That's mudita. I appreciate that, hold that appreciation, and understand that the mind becomes like what it contemplates. So if you hold wholesome qualities in the mind with loving appreciation, your own mind is going to develop more of those qualities. One of the things to be careful of with the fault-finding mind is the more we apply it to things outside of ourselves, it's also going to be functioning inwardly. People who have kind of a hypercritical mind, and so a judgmentalness, think they know everything about everyone and everything. That then turns inwards. You'll find that your own efforts are never good enough. You'll never be satisfied by your own efforts. There's always some kind of commenting mind. Well, yesterday's meditation was more peaceful. Last retreat was better. It's like it's a double-edged sword. If you apply it outwardly, it will be coming home, it will be coming inward. So it's a practice of truly appreciating what has been given, and probably not consuming too much Dhamma. Like I think maybe you can listen to too many Dhamma talks from too many teachers, then I think that may have the effect of appreciating it less. So I would recommend choosing a few, your favorite teachers, listen carefully, listen sincerely, and recognize what you've learned from each of them. So in Thailand, with regards to asking the question, what's the appropriate way to show our respect for teachers in the Thai forest tradition? For the people who live in Thailand, they would try to visit their teacher on his birthday. And it's just, I think it's just because that's the day that this person was born. It's a day where we bring them to mind. Another thing that people would do in Thailand to show their respect for their teacher is they would support the projects of his monastery. Okay, that's the home of the teacher. And we'll support the projects in the monastery according to one's, means. But I think the best way to show our gratitude and respect is to follow the suggestions and advice of the teacher. And that's the Patipati Puja, practicing in accordance with what our dear teachers teach us, and then dedicating the merit of that practice to your teacher, to your teachers, to their health, to their long life. And a few years ago, I had to write a biography as part of a permanent residency application process. One of my monastery committee people went to the immigration department and said, how do we apply for a permanent residency visa for a foreign monk? And the person at the office dropped Ajahn Sumedho's biography on the table and said, he needs one of these. That was a very frustrating experience for me because I was 48 at the time. And who writes a biography at 48? And who writes their own biography? Someone who's trying to go beyond self. But that was what was required. And I did feel a lot of frustration about it. But interestingly enough, the immigration policy in Thailand does not have a category for foreign monks. Foreign monks are given provisionally visas. I think the paradigm is understood that people study for a period of time and then they go back to their homes and they spread Dhamma, spread Buddhism in their home countries. There's not like a quota for foreign monks. I suppose it's understood that there are enough Buddhist monks who understand Buddhism to teach the Thai Buddhists. So it's actually quite difficult even if a monk speaks Thai very well and has a lot of Thai students and has contributed to Thai society, it's not easy to get a visa. So the reason you need to write a biography is the committee that contemplates whether or not to give you your visa, 20 people on the committee, need to look at your life's work and decide whether you've helped Thailand enough. So you have to present what you've done, which was also a bit frustrating because I put most of my focus upon meditation, and I'd also put a lot of my focus on teaching people in English in other countries because that's the people who I could help. I don't have the same dexterity with the Thai language that I have with the English language, and there are a lot of English-speaking Buddhists, particularly in places like Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, who could benefit. So I had a focus on that, and then all of a sudden I had to show the ways I'd helped Thailand. It was a bit challenging, but most people know, I think, eventually I was able to meet with His Majesty, Rama X, and the King of Thailand gifted me citizenship. So I didn't have to be scrutinized by the committee of 20. And so I did get my citizenship. I'm very grateful. But when I was writing the biography, I asked myself, how can I do this in a way that I might actually enjoy the process rather than just resent it and feel frustrated? And I decided to make the focus of the autobiography a description of who my teachers had been and what I had learned from them. And it was a very interesting exercise because I was aware of each of those teachers, having lived with them. I was quite mindful of the things I didn't like about them, or parts of their teaching that I didn't agree with perfectly, or things that I found a bit frustrating. But I didn't make that the focus. I wasn't going to write a critique of all of my teachers and present to the world at 25 years how much more I know than my teachers. That would be very unwholesome and very unskillful and very negligent. Because the fact is, if we didn't have the original teachers who taught us, we wouldn't even have that ability to focus on the positives and the negatives and critique other people. The knowledge that I have, the understanding that I have, comes from the opportunities that my teachers gave me. So the appropriate thing to do is to recollect on the people who gave me my opportunities and worked very hard to support those opportunities and focus on the positive. So that's what I put in my biography. And the understanding that it was going to be translated into Thai, read by Thai people. Thai people want their faith encouraged. They want their faith lifted. They didn't want to read a critique of teachers. So that was, and that did make it a pleasant exercise. I was able to explain what I'd learned from Ajahn Achalo and what I'd learned from Luang Por Pasana, what I appreciated about the examples of their beings, what I'd learned from Ajahn Kalyano, Ajahn Anand, the Dalai Lama, my parents, and made it a exercise in mudita, in gratitude, in respect, in appreciation. And then that made the experience of having to write an autobiography somewhat pleasant. And so yes, we can, but I was mindful when I was writing these chapters about these different teachers of the personality differences and the difference of emphasis that I might put on certain practices as opposed to what they would emphasize. But that's not, if one places one's mind on dwelling on the perceived fault, it's very seductive, but it doesn't brighten or gladden the mind, and it doesn't produce merit. We do need to have discriminating, discerning intelligence and wisdom. We do need to learn from the strengths and the weaknesses of our teachers. We train ourselves. But in terms of an appropriate attitude for a Buddhist practitioner, anything that's been given to us, we have gratitude for, and we cherish. And anyone who's given us an opportunity, if we hold that in mind with genuine appreciation, the mind becomes glad, the mind becomes happy, it does produce merit. And I would also expect that meditation deepens because one's creating punya, good karma, mudita brahma vihara. Lord Buddha says, Katanyu and Katavedi, guardians of the world. He did also say that people who feel grateful are rare, and people who express their gratitude are even more rare. But he did say that they are guardians of the world, and that it was good to recognize what was given, to be grateful. The Katavedi is then reciprocating, showing gestures of appreciation. So, yes, the best way, though, to honor one's teachers is to recognize what they taught us and to practice in accordance with what they've taught us to the best of our ability, and then dedicate a portion of the merit of that to them. Yes, and then for people who live closer to their teachers, obviously visiting regularly, and that's not possible for everybody. I hope that's helpful to some degree. I wish you all the best in your cultivation of Katanyu Katavedi as a foundation for your own well-being. It was interesting on my birthday the other day. A lot of people came, a lot of people wished me happy birthday, and I said to one of the monks, if one more person wishes me happy birthday, I'm going to kill them. Which isn't very nice, is it? But it was like, you don't come and wish your happy birthday to your teacher because he needs you to. It's just a nice thing to do, to acknowledge that I benefited from the fact that this person was born. Of course, I was joking, and on another level, I appreciated everybody coming and wishing me happy birthday. So.
Ajahn, question 3. When I observe Theravada monks in a Theravada temple in Singapore, seeing that they do accept red packets with money inside from the lay people on their birthday or on a special occasion like Chinese New Year, then I compare with the forest sangha tradition. I know that I shouldn't be too judgmental, but I feel some confusion. Seeking your guidance here. Thank you.
So, with regards Theravada monks who receive cash in their hands, except money. So, I think it's important to understand that most monks do in this day and age. I think the way the rule was described in Lord Buddha's time was not to touch gold and silver, which was the currency. So, one interpretation of that rule is money isn't gold or silver. That's one kind of justification. And what Lord Buddha meant by his Patimokkha rule was not to be touching currency, not to be touching things that could be used as cash. Even so, in Thailand, I think the monks that who don't accept personal funds and handle cash is probably about 2 or 3%. So it's important to understand that. So about 97% of the monks are accepting and using cash. So, and there's, a few different ways to relate to this. In my experience of practicing in Bodh Gaya for many thousands of hours and having different monks come and sit to the left of me and to the right of me, and different friends passing through, and meeting monks from different lineages within the Theravada, I've observed a bunch of interesting things. I know some monks who sit 9, 10, 11, 12 hours a day who do handle money. And I've noticed that some of these monks are very frugal with the way they use money. They're not the ones bargaining at the stalls outside. And I have seen good, strict forest monks go with their lay students and get lots of malas and lots of statues and lots of shawls and lots of cloths and souvenirs for all of their friends. And so I've seen technically strict, well, Vinaya monks doing a lot of shopping and spending a lot of money, not their money. And I have seen monks who handled money, but who were very, very modest in the way they used it. So, in general, obviously, I do think if you're going to become a monk, that it's good to keep the rules that Lord Buddha laid down. But at the same time, I personally know some monks who accept and use cash who are inspiring and good practitioners and who seem to know how to use money without being deluded by it. And I've seen monks who technically keep the vinaya. There is a steward, there is a fund, but get quite intoxicated when those funds are available. And so, I think in general, we have to know a monk fairly well for a period of time. We get a sense for that practitioner's goodness, and there are exceptions. For myself, I am really grateful that I ordained into a tradition where we have to keep the rules and checks and balances. When you have a steward that's holding the cash, it's like if you want to buy something that's inappropriate, the steward might be saying, Ajahn, I don't know if this is, there's some checks and balances in that. And but then again, if a person really has lots of faith and really loves their Ajahn and there's a lot of money, that they might let you get whatever you want, So yeah, I think understanding that the bhikkhus who keep as many rules as possible to the letter and in spirit is rare, but there are good monks who use cash. Like some of those monks in the monasteries and cities, they're probably teaching the Sunday school and they're going to the funerals and they're encouraging people who are grieving, and there's a lot of kind of outreach, social work, giving advice, being a spiritual friend, teaching their children. So these monks also have a role to play, and they do contribute to the Buddhist community. But yeah, just kind of keep an eye on it. Is it within parameters of what still seems virtuous? And then recognize that when you do meet a good Vinaya practicing monk, that's rare and special. We are 2,600 years after Lord Buddha. So the numbers of those high quality practitioners is less. But, so when we meet them, that's our good fortune.
Question 4. Dear Ajahn, may I know if my views are correct in the following consideration below? I sense myself being judgmental and righteous here. I feel that Vesak Day should be celebrated by doing retreats and observing noble silence and meditating more, and not through attending stalls to see what is there to eat or buy, etc. Some Mahayana temples have performances as well. Any thoughts? Thank you.
So the person who wrote this question lives in Singapore, where there are, I think it's a bit like Christmas and Christians, Easter with Christians. You know, when you have a place where there's a large number of Buddhist practitioners, they're going to have different caliber, different types of practitioners. So yeah, I think just like a lot of Christians may only go to church on Christmas Day, and a lot of people who call them Christians may not even go to church on Christmas Day. Then in any religion, there's going to be what you might consider the bark and the softwood, and then there's the hardwood, or the leaves and the fruit. And you know, in a way, I remember he was a young idealistic monk talking with Ajahn Achalo about some of the poor behavior of some of the city monks in Thailand, and he was saying, you know, we really depend upon one another. It's like the forest monks, practitioners monks, were like the hardwood, and the city monks are a bit like the softwood and the bark and the leaves. And he said, can you imagine if there was only the forest monks, and you've got 65 million Buddhists that want to see monks, and you know, they would all be coming to the forest monasteries. We wouldn't have time to practice. So it's like, it's good that the Wat Ban monks are willing to receive guests and give out amulets and bless things and chant and sprinkle holy water. And among the Buddhist practitioners who have quality, they will then seek out the monks that know more about meditation, and they will find them. But the heartwood needs the softwood and the bark and the leaves, and in order to produce the fruit. So I agree that the best way to honor Visakha Puja is probably a nice quiet day at home meditating more, honoring and recollecting what really happened on this day, the birth of the Bodhisattva, the enlightenment of the Buddha, the passing into final Nibbana, and giving some thought about those occasions, and doing a practice puja. So it's a correct aspiration to honor that day in that way. But then also, yeah, no need to be judgmental of what other people do. You know, a lot of people, if you've got a couple of young kids, they're not going to let you sit and be quiet and meditate all day anyway. So what are you going to do? You take them to a Buddhist temple, let them see a story about the Buddha's life, or go and eat some nice food at the temple. It's okay. When the kids are a bit older, mum and dad have a bit more time for meditation, you know, they can honor it in that more, in a way, with more integrity. Yeah, so yes, not to be too judgmental. We understand we have cultural traditions. Not everybody's into the practice, but at least there's a percentage of people calling themselves Buddhists and supporting monasteries. It's what makes it possible. I remember reading many of the biographies of the great masters, Lumpoli, Ajahn Chah. Actually, they ordained at village monasteries with not very good standards. But the fact, and then they found from that situation, they found out about teachers with more integrity, teachers with more quality. But if they didn't have that local monastery in their village with the monks with poorer standards, they wouldn't have had the opportunity to go forth as monks, and they wouldn't have found the great teachers, and they wouldn't have become the great masters that they did become. So having kind of cultural Buddhism and having Buddhist institution kind of present in the world, in the city, is a good thing overall. We understand how it supports the deeper practice and opportunities, good opportunities for practitioners. I will leave it at that, Shinxing. Every time I blink, I feel like I have a piece of glass going over my eyeball. So I've done my very best to encourage you, despite the Vedana, and it might be time for me to lie down.